So, hello everyone. We are just waiting after Mark from Florida. He had some troubles with the Wi-Fi, so we wait a bit, and it lets also the other participants to take time to enter the room.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Mark, we can hear you.
Yeah, my internet dropped off for some reason. I don't know why, so my apologies. If it does, I'll try to reconnect another way.
It's too early in the morning for your internet.
So yeah, I wait maybe. No, I think it's okay now. So yeah, welcome everybody. So today we did already one workshop about Taiwan, and now it's about USA. Welcome to this session about breaking into the US. We will have 4 speakers, so 2 introducers, Silvana from AIBC Eurocluster and Laura from Minalogic. And we will also have Mark from InnoConnect in Florida, and Rico from Sistema, a German company also in Atlanta. So thank you to all, and I will let the microphone to Laura from Minalogic. She will present Silicon Eurocluster because this webinar is also in the framework of Silicon Eurocluster. Laura, I'll let you the floor. Sorry, this was the agenda. So sorry. So yeah, as you can see, we have Mark, and afterward we'll have Rico. And for the beginning, we have Laura and Silvana. So enjoy all, and Laura, I'll let you the floor.
Many thanks, Laetitia. Welcome to all the participants today to this webinar. Many thanks for your participation. So I am Laure de Tassini. I am European Project Manager at Minalogic. And Minalogic coordinates the Silicon Eurocluster project. Because this webinar is happening in the framework of Silicon Eurocluster and AIBC Eurocluster projects. And these projects are funded by the EU SMP program. Next slide, please. So I'm going to explain and have a short introduction of the project. So what is Silicon Eurocluster? It's a European funded project which lasts 30 months and ends in February 2025. So it's coordinated by Minalogic, but it gathers 10 partners from 9 different EU countries. These partners know each other very well because they have been part of the Silicon Europe Alliance for more than 10 years now. And on top of these 9 partners, we have enriched our competencies with ICT cluster in Bulgaria. The project main objective is to achieve European self-sufficiency with increased competitiveness and resilience in the electronics value chain with specific attention to SMEs. So it's quite a big challenge, and to contribute to this challenge, we have concrete actions. One of them was the financing of 12 demonstration projects to support the adoption of digital technologies by SMEs. These projects are now finished, and we are communicating on them, on the results of them on the social media at the moment. We also had an open call for 25 green vouchers to support the integration of green expertise into SMEs, and this open call is now closed. We also give support for SMEs about their internationalization, like this webinar, for example. And we also have activities of training of clusters workforces. So that's it for me. I leave the floor to Silvana, who is going to present you the AIBC Eurocluster. Thank you.
Thank you, Laure. Thank you very much. I don't know if you want me to share the screen, or it's okay if I can just go ahead like that.
Like you want, like you prefer.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just gonna to show it a little bit better in this case. So I'm Silvana Sanfeliu. Meanwhile, I'm opening the presentation. I'm the coordinator. I work for Piemonte Innova. We are an ICT cluster on working on based on Italy, on Piedmont, and we are the coordinators of another Eurocluster similar as the one that Laura was introducing. In this case, we're working on the topics of AI and blockchain related to apply to different fields. So we have manufacturing, mobility, logistics, and energy. All of them. So the consortium is composed by us, as I was mentioning, from Italy, Fondazione Piemonte Innova, and we're an ICT cluster, another ICT cluster, which is BWCom from Germany, the Baden-Württemberg region. We also have a common partner with the other Eurocluster, which is ICT cluster in Bulgaria. And then we have 3 other clusters representing the 3 different, let's say the 4 different industrial ecosystems from the project. One is the mobility and logistics cluster from Basque Country. Then we have the energy cluster and clean tech cluster from Piedmont, Italy too, and the Polish cluster representing Tool Valley and the manufacturing entities. So our, let's say, main focus was, of course, to support European SMEs in the topics of AI and blockchain, as I was mentioning, and the development of projects, as well as the other Euroclusters did. So we had also different open calls. We had actually 4 topics open calls. We had 204 applicants, and we selected 79 companies from all over Europe. We had calls for participation to international events and missions. We had some calls on training and related to learn about AI and blockchain and how they can improve everyone's businesses. We had another call on digitalization services and product development. So it was mainly companies from the different ecosystems adopting AI or blockchain solutions or developing a little bit more about that. And then we have 9 project proposals, which were more like bigger projects, including at least 2 SMEs per proposal. So we had 19 SMEs involved from 10 different countries, actually, working on specific project proposals, developing and doing testing and demonstrations of the applications of artificial intelligence and blockchain on the manufacturing and energy mainly sectors. So yeah, that's what I wanted to include. We are, as one of our main, let's say, targets and scopes of the project is actually the support for the internationalization. And that's why we are organizing or co-organizing this webinar together with the other projects. In that case, we can collaborate and we provide you with this information related to the US, which was actually one of the main interesting countries from the companies that we were working with. So that's all from my side. The projects are ending right now, so we will be presenting them shortly, also all the results that we achieved. So yeah, that's all from me. I will give the floor now to Mark Spinoglio from InnoConnect.
Yeah, Mark, you have to enter with the guest link. Thank you, Silvana. But if you want, I can share for you. I have your slides, like you want. Because you are in the normal link for all participants. It's why
I did not know that. I went, yeah, apologies. My internet went down. So when I came back in, I guess I'm in the guest link. So
I have your
you want
slides,
to, great. Would you want run it for me then?
Okay. Thank you, Silvana. And now we will share the slides of Mark and let Mark on the floor. Okay, so.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. Just very brief background on myself. I have 25 years of experience working with small, medium, and large companies entering the US market. I've lived in Europe. I've worked with framework programs since FP4, and I've worked with the Commission for about 8-10 years on clustering. So I'm very familiar with clusters in Europe, and actually I apply the European model in the US now. We'll talk a little bit about that today. So I'll wear two hats in my presentation. One is InnoConnect is my company, so I work with companies helping them enter the US market. And then the other side, I work with clusters in the US, helping them structure their services on best practices, what I consider best practices from Europe. And so you'll see that in the second half of my slides. If we can go to the next slide, please. So what I like to do, I always like to start very wide and then narrow down into specifics. And so we'll look at the US market in general, and then I'll talk about challenges and opportunities. And these are lists of challenges and opportunities that I found over the years that companies have faced when trying to enter the US market. And then I'll look at a specific case where a production technology example, which I think is a very good case of how you can dial down to a region in the US that best fits your objectives, because it's a quite large market. And then a success story, a company that I've been working with probably, I guess about 15 years now. And I'll go into key do's and don'ts for the market. And from that, I'll give a very brief background on Central Florida and our cluster initiative in Central Florida and what's available to you to leverage from Florida to enter the US market. So with that, next slide, please. So in general, US is quite large. Everyone knows that. I like the image on the right side because that very much puts it in perspective. You see Germany there covers about a third of the country. Within that is California. And so if you look at the GDP of the US, we're first, China behind us, and then actually Germany, Japan, and then California, which is on the West Coast. If it were a country on its own, would be the fifth largest economy in the world. So we have a very large economy just in California. And so I've done a lot of work in California for European companies, but there's challenges there that I'll speak to as well. But this really puts in perspective the size of the market from a GDP perspective. And then if you look at from a just geographical perspective, we're 2.5 times the size of Western Europe. With 340 million people. I think the EU has, 430, something like that. So quite large market, and companies find that very intimidating. And so with that, I'd like to go through a step process on how you enter the market. Next slide, please. And so if we look at the main challenges, what are the challenges? Well, the size of the market is significant. And so normally there needs to be identified target regions within the market. So when I work with companies, especially if they're working with consumer goods, then we're looking at different regions of the market that fits for them. Or if they're looking at, they have a technology that is applied to a specific sector, then we'll identify where there's a high concentration of potential clients for them within different regions of the US. Geographical distance from the market adds supply chain costs. That's something that's always an issue. And so you really have to dive down and see what the costs are involved there and your landed costs, which you'll see in a later slide. Time zone difference. Right now I'm in Oregon, which is on the West Coast, 9-hour difference from Central Europe. So I'm used to getting up very early and having calls like this. And actually a lot of Americans are. So I find that the difference, that's the most drastic difference is 9 hours to Central Europe. That's doable, but there's challenges with that. And we will talk about that as well in the case success story that I'll talk about later. Exchange rates fluctuations. This is a key one. Last time I looked at this over a 12-month period, there's a 16% difference or fluctuation, and that's important. And that that hits. I represent a couple companies, U.S. market, and that really hits the bottom line there when we're able to invoice and when we receive payment on those invoices. So that's something that you need to take into account as well. Local laws and regulations, always a challenge. And so need someone that understands what laws and regulations apply to your product or service. And strong competition. For example, just recently I was looking at the U.S. market for an aerospace company, very innovative small company out of Europe. and that's interested in applying their services in the US. They work in Europe, very successful in Europe, but unfortunately there is a similar company to theirs in the US market working within the space industry. So the opportunity was very minimal for them to really break into the US market. So that's something that's important. So it's important to connect with someone that can analyze that for you at the beginning and see if there is a potential opportunity. And of course, people are always interested or think that litigation is common in the US. It is. But in general, I've never had an issue with it representing small companies in the US. Had companies that had to use a lawyer on a few occasions, but most cases, you know, when you're partnering with a US company, they want a win-win scenario. And so they're normally very open, very positive. And US companies are very direct. US people are very direct. Americans are direct. So you tend to work through contract issues very easily. And mitigation is always an opportunity and something that should be leveraged. So I don't see litigation as an issue, and it shouldn't be something that keeps you from coming to the US market. Next slide, please. Potential challenges, I'll just talk about a couple of these. Achieve a competitive price point. That goes back to what are the costs to enter the market. When I work with consumer products, a lot of that cost is around staging product in the US market, which can be an issue for a small company. And then effective market presence, that's a key. What is needed to be a competitor in the market? Sometimes that requires a showroom for technologies, and that can be expensive. Other times it's a representative that can represent you across the US, and I'll talk about that in a case study. And so that's not as expensive, and that's a fairly risk-free approach. So there's a range of approaches to the market. And then state requirements, non-tariff barriers vary by state. Labeling is a good one there. And you know, if you look at California, for example, environmental protection regulations are very strong, and California is normally the leader across the US. And so what California implements and happens, it rolls out across the US at some point normally. And so if you enter into market in California and meet the regulations, normally you're well above what the regulations are from a federal or national level. And so that's an important aspect of it as well. Product liability law. And so from that, looking at measures that reduce your liability, that really depends on what your product or service is. And I've never dealt with a company that had major issues in that area. Complex tax system, it can be complex. You mainly deal with the federal, which is a national tax system, and then you deal with the state tax system primarily. And depending on the product, I have some clients that we have representatives in the US that pitch the products, but then the sales go through Europe, which then makes it, in the software area, makes it quite straightforward and simple because of the tax treaties with the US. And so really at the beginning, what's important is that you do get with a tax attorney, international tax attorney, just to see what the implications are and what needs to be in place to ensure that you're meeting the US federal and state tax law in the states that you operate. Next slide, please. And so where are the opportunities? Well, the large single market is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, right? We're $25 trillion GDP, 342 million population. Our culture is fairly common across the US, although there are subtle differences between the North and South, East and West. But in general, it's a pretty straightforward market and pretty common characteristics from a demographic perspective. So there's a large opportunity there. One common language, as I said, although Spanish, depending on where you are in the US, Spanish can be important in southern states. For example, in Florida, if you're looking at marketing in Miami or in that region, Spanish is extremely important. Arizona, it's important. So you see the border states, Spanish can be important. Common general culture, just spoke about that. Economically and politically stable. So as we're in an election year at the moment, you may argue that that's not the case, but we're still ranked in the first 20 countries. We're very stable from an economic and political perspective. Although this year I've seen a huge drop off in companies willing to make investments, willing to partner, just because it's an election year. That's really the only issue there. So they're waiting to see what happens with the election before they make any mid to long-term investments or agreements. So that's really the only issue there. In election years, we tend to fluctuate and you see less activity. Access to a global supply chain. This is important. Very strong global supply chain through the US. You also find if you have a presence in the US that you have opportunities to efficient supply chains to, for example, South America. Out of Miami, that's very strong to South America. So there's companies that establish a presence in the US from Europe, in Florida, in Orlando, or in Miami, purely because it gives them access to US market and gives them the strong supply chain opportunities to South America, to the South American market. So that's important for companies. And then a low average tariff. So we do with the EU and US, our average when I looked at this was under 3%. So that was very good. So that's always important. Next slide, please. Other potential opportunities. Oh, go back one. Yeah, it's a technologically advanced economy. We're used to accepting new technology very quickly. So are quick to accept technologies. The implementation in the market is very straightforward. Because, as you know, with innovation, it's exponential, the growth and changes in technologies. So we're a consumer-based economy that is used to change and used to growth in technology. So that's an important opportunity. Niche market opportunities as well, value-added products or perceived value from country of origin. When you work on consumer products, that's primarily, that's a strong one. Olive oil out of Spain or Italy, that type of thing. When you're looking at technology, that's also still a strong one from Germany, by the way. And I manage a partnership for a European client with a German cutting solution company, Zune, which I'll talk about, actually out of Switzerland. But Switzerland and Germany very well known for high quality technology. And so that does bring some value to the market. And then comprehensive intellectual property laws. So there's a lot that goes behind that through IP. And you can have a presentation just on IP, but really it's important that there's really 4 areas of IP. One is patent, then copyright, trademark, and trade secrets. And so there are 4 distinct different areas of IP that you need to be concerned of and aware of and how to manage. And what I find, in short, and if there's questions on this, I'm happy to do a deep dive in this during the question period. But in short, what's important if you're a small company is really that you have in your contracts with partners in the US or when you're sharing technologies in the US that you have a process that allows you to control your IP. And if there's any break with the contract or your IP is being used illegally, that you have a process in place through mitigation, then arbitration, and then the court system. And that's highly important because that way in mitigation, it's a low cost approach. Arbitration is low cost, and you never want to end up in the court system because that's a high cost to a small company, and most companies can't afford that. So I look at IP and really your IP is only as strong as you can protect it within the legal system. And so never had a problem in the US with IP. Of course, I've represented companies in the China market. I've had huge problems in the China market. but I've never had any problems in the U.S. Regarding IP. And to start, a non-disclosure agreement is important with companies that you talk to about your technology. Hopefully, they will sign them. Capital investment firms don't, so that's always an issue. But there's a way to protect yourself when you do approach them. So there's a lot to talk around IP, but it's important that it stays at the forefront. And one thing that a lot of small companies, U.S. companies, don't realize is their name is an important aspect. It's a trademark. And so you want to protect your name. Even if you're looking at a small market in the US, you want to protect your name, because as you grow, you'll enter other markets, and there may be another company that has the same name. For example, I represent a company, and I've trademarked that name in Oregon, California, but that name's being used on the East Coast by someone else. And so if I do want to, if I move into a lot of activity on the East Coast with that company, then I would have an issue. So you need to be aware of that. And so even if you don't think you have an IP or intellectual property at the moment through a product, but you still may have it through your name. And so that's important. Product certifications. So just straightforward tests for U.S. market. There's private industries out there. I have this down more from the product consumables or grocery products, for example. So organic certification that can be done outside the U.S. by companies, and so that's a key. That's one that I've worked with in the past. So product certification is pretty straightforward, and it's just knowing who to go to meet those certifications. Next slide, please. And so just a quick example here on a production technology perspective. There's an approach that I take with companies that have for example, a technology in tooling that supports the product technology market. So it could be supporting a automotive manufacturing. So tooling for a CNC machine, for example. And what I did here in this case is, first thing, if you look at the top right, you have concentrations of competitors. You always want to know who your competitors. When I talk with a company from Europe, I ask them, who are your competitors in the US? If they don't know, I ask them for their competitors in Europe. Then that gives me a profile that I can do a search in the US and see what their competition is like in the US, find where the concentrations of their competitors are. In this case, the concentrations were in California and then around Michigan, Illinois, and Ohio, which are very well known for being automotive industry and some aerospace industry, especially in California. And so that's where the competition was. So it was clear that the competition was where the manufacturers were. Then I looked at how does the competition approach the market? How do they represent themselves? What are the relevant market channels? And if you look at the tooling industry, for example, the manufacturers' local representatives were about 55% of the overall. And then some used 25% used distributors, and then about 15% had manufacturer direct, where they had their customers were ordering from them directly, and it was being shipped from the manufacturer of the tooling to the customer. And then there's turnkey solutions providers that were about 5%. But what I also saw was that manufacturer, just through market research that had been done, that manufacturer direct sales were increasing and manufacturer local representative sales was decreasing, which was a very strong positive for a company that I was working with out of Europe and trying to come up with a strategy for the market. So it was clear that there is less importance put onto having a local representative and more important to having at least a single location in the market that they can order directly from. Okay. Then looking at their customer base. Where were their customers located? And so if you look at the automotive industry, you see them in the green there on the left. You see California, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, or Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, excuse me. And then you see the red states to the south east side of the US. So they're migrating from the green states to the red states. And that's important because if you look at that that map of where the customer base is and where the competitors are concentrated, the competitors were concentrated still in the states that were green and had not migrated so much to the red states. And then if you look at the aerospace industry, you have the same situation where you have high concentrations in the green states. Washington's part of that, the top left there, because of Boeing, and they're migrating to the red states. And so if you look at the red states, there's strong opportunities there because that's a growing market for tooling manufacturer or tooling suppliers. And so if you go to the next slide, please. So if you look where the conclusions are, the conclusions were that manufacturer's local representative was the approach to take, because they're purchasing the customers are purchasing more directly from the manufacturers, and locating that manufacturer representative in South Carolina, which I circled there with an arrow, would seem to be the key opportunity, because that's where a lot of the aerospace and automotive companies were investing in new factories, and so their supply chain, their parts providers were investing in the areas as well. So it's a strong opportunity for tooling suppliers to be located there, and it also gave them reach to the other surrounding red states, which had growing markets for manufacturing as well. And then finally, the target states for potential expansion were the green ones. So as we're looking at putting a representative in South Carolina, where the circle is, saw that there is opportunity if they were competitive in pricing and they were growing their market in South Carolina and the surrounding red states, there was opportunities to have representatives in the other states as well. And so it was a phased approach to the market. Okay, that's the key here. So looking at the lowest risk investment to be able to enter the US market, here it was clear that a specific region was of importance. And so that was the approach that they took. Next slide, please. And so one success story I like to bring up is Mind. They're a Portuguese company. I've been working with them for years. When they're looking at the US, they realized that they needed a representative in the US. I was that person. And so what we did is we were able to get them into the largest footwear companies in the US that are headquartered in the US, because their software is a 3D and 2D CAD software for footwear, and they've expanded into furniture and upholstery in general, which opens up the aeronautical industry as well. And so first thing we did is we got them into the US market, into the red states that you see there on the left side, which represent Columbia, Under Armour, Brooks. The question mark there is Nike. Nike's a client, but we're not allowed to use them on any of our slides or on our website. And so that's part of the agreement we have with them. And so once we were into the large companies with the CAD software, then we're able to roll into those companies with the downstream cutting solutions, which is the automated cutting from Zune, which is a Swiss company. And then we have a partnership with die cutting out of Canada. And so those developed because of our activities in the US, and they use our software. They use the Mind CAD system and then the Mind cutting solution software. And so very strong collaboration with Zune out of Europe, who has a US presence in North America, very strong US presence in North America in different sectors than footwear. And then ODI out of Canada, which has a stronger presence in Mexico and in Canada and some in the US in using die cutting, which allows them to use our software as well. And so through that, we developed those strong relationships, and that allowed us to enter new sectors, such as the furniture sector, which is where you see the green furniture and aeronautical sectors, where you see the green states. That's really what we opened up through our collaboration with Zune and with ODI. Then, because we were working with large companies like Columbia and Nike and so forth, that opened the door to do innovative custom software development. And so we started working with their innovation groups and doing customized software development for innovation groups, which is very interesting. And through that, it was extremely important to have a US presence because I needed to negotiate the contracts with them. I still need to visit the innovation groups at those companies and have discussions with them and see where their opportunities are to develop customized software to meet their needs. And so that became a huge profit revenue or profit source for the company, which we did not think would exist at the beginning, but it just came through those relationships. And so it's really important to have that presence and to grow that presence. And so with that, next slide, please. I think I'm running a little late. I have 5 more minutes or so. I think that's what I have. But anyways, we'll just quickly hear the do's and the don'ts. Due diligence, that's important. You need to how to approach the market, strengths and weaknesses of your competitors, and of your company. Determine minimum pricing, landing costs. We talked a little bit about that. And identify key region, prioritize key regions. Take a low risk approach. Always try to take a low risk approach to the market. Establish a strategic partner if possible in the market, or and go through a cluster support organization. We have that opportunity, a very strong opportunity in Florida that I'll speak to just briefly. The don'ts are focusing on traditional landing locations. A lot of companies that I deal with out of Europe, they look at New York or they look at California, and sometimes it makes sense because they may have their largest clients located in those areas, but most cases it doesn't because those are high cost of living, high cost for companies to be established. They're not company friendly states, so I tend to discourage them from that unless they have clients there or it's a strategic importance for the networking in those regions. Developing a market strategy that addresses the entire market. Most cases, that's not the approach that should be taken because small companies really don't have the ability to invest to cover the entire market. Assuming a multi-location physical presence is necessary. Again, we talked about that. In many cases, that's not a requirement. And finally, really don't approach the market on your own. There's opportunities, and I will show that through the cluster to really leverage services that exist in the US. Okay, and so if we go into the next slides. And so looking at just briefly here, I like to use Central Florida. I've been working with Central Florida for 4 years now. We've established a cluster initiative, Semfluence, which when you go to our website, or you go to this, there's a QR code there to go to the website. You'll see it's very similar. Semfluence is very similar to a structure of a cluster that you'd see in Europe because, again, I took what I consider best practice from Europe and we applied it in Florida. We've been extremely successful. We started with 4 clusters, and our 5th cluster is a semiconductor cluster, which has only been established as a formal cluster structure for 2 years now. And in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of investment, a lot of interest from the federal government, NSF, National Science Foundation, Build Back Better initiative from President Biden, and then the Department of Defense has put in a lot of investment in companies and our research entities within our cluster, $500 million, and we focus primarily on advanced packaging. And so there's a lot of investment going into there, and we are the hub in the US for advanced packaging when it comes to semiconductors. And we're doing very innovative work there. Some of it confidential because it's for the Department of Defense. But that's where we are becoming well-known nationally and internationally. Next slide, please. And so these are some companies that are in our region. Some of them are formerly in our cluster. IMAC and Skywater are at our hub, which is Neo City, which is just outside of Orlando. Orlando is very well known for Disney World, and so it should be better well known for simulation and for different areas as well that I'll talk about in a minute. because there's a very strong university base there. But the key is that we do have major companies locally. We have companies, and we've done a lot of work with the federal government on the defense side for decades. And so there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise in the region. Next slide, please. And so we have a cluster management organization that manages our cluster initiative, and that is the Florida High Tech Corridor, which I represent. And we're affiliated to 3 universities. But what I want to really drive home here is that the universities, University of Central Florida, UCF, is the largest university in the US. Within those 3 universities, you see the circles to the right, that area of Florida, we have 500,000 students. We have 100,000 students that graduate annually from the universities. So there's a very strong knowledge and human resource that you can tap into for well-educated folks within the semiconductor field. And in fact, we have local colleges that give certifications in tech certifications over a 6-month or 2-year program specifically designed for microelectronic semiconductor manufacturing. And so, and very well known and actually rated top in the US in that area. So very strong output of a skilled workforce in the region. Next slide, please. And so we're becoming internationally recognized clusters. As I said, we started with 4, the energy, gaming, learning sciences, life sciences. We've actually partnered in life sciences with a cluster in Italy in looking at opportunities. And then because we are so successful, we organized a semiconductor cluster. And as I said earlier, that's bringing in a lot of funding from the federal level and a lot of funding from the state level. What I like, you see the maze of clusters to your left and all those names there. That really just shows that our clusters are really well connected to each other. We see a lot of cross-cluster collaboration. A lot of our simulation gaming cluster folks do a lot of collaborations with our life science or with our energy side. So it's really interesting to see that cross-cluster collaboration. And I think that's quite unique because we manage 5 clusters under one organization. Next slide, please. And just quickly here, this is our member journey. But what's important here is that we've had companies that have been affiliated with European clusters who met us through the European cluster, started working with us, and they've set up a soft landing within Orlando area and have become members of our clusters. And there's no fee, we're a free membership, and they've gone through this process. And so we do a very interesting process where they apply, then we do a needs assessment, and we start providing them services free of charge. And we have over 150 entrepreneur support organizations in our region that we connect them to for other services that we may not do that they need. And so we're a one-stop shop, basically, and they come to us. But what's important here is you see the monthly newsletter that I circled there. If you go to the next slide, please. We have a monthly newsletter. There's a QR code. Feel free to register for our newsletter. It's free. We put in there funding opportunities that are happening locally, regionally, nationally, some international. You see activities that happen in our region that are focused for semiconductor and for other 4 clusters. And so it gives you a very good perspective of how dynamic our innovation ecosystem is, what opportunities there are there. And also, most importantly, it'll give you an idea of where there is funding from the federal level or state level to help start up small companies that become established in the US. And so just, it's interesting, it's free of charge. Our members love this. We do another one specific for members only, that a weekly collisions email that we put out, funding opportunities that we work with them on. Because that's something that we do a lot of, is helping our small and large, or actually our small companies, receive funding through our federal government and state opportunities to help them grow. So next slide, please. And so lastly, left side, you see the contacts for our semiconductor cluster. There's the Eurocluster website there. And then you have my contacts for the Florida organization that I work with, and you have the QR code there for our Semfluence initiative. Feel free to contact me directly. More than happy to talk to anyone, free of charge. So, if you want to set up a meeting, do a deep dive on something, by all means. And so I love working with European companies, love working with European cluster organizations. And so please feel free to contact me. That's it for my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Are there some questions to Mark right now? And we will come back after to other questions, but if you have questions now, you can ask with a microphone or write it down in the chat. Otherwise, I will let Rico from Systema in Germany and in Atlanta present his company and how to export to USA as a startup from Germany.
Yeah, if there are no questions, I would love to step in. First of all, a big thank you, Mark. You took the words right out of my mouth. It was really amazing. I can confirm a lot of your experiences. Perhaps we didn't take the opportunity at the end to collect questions also and answer them together, because we are representing the other side of the game. So we are a German company and entered the US market as one of our global strategies. And I would just explain a bit the journey, how we went all the way. And what we call this is bringing the art of automation to the US. And just a short introduction on my person. So my name is Rico Walter. I'm with the industry for 25 years now, 16 with the company Systema, in charge of business development and customers. And since we are talking about the US, this is something I learned from our customers. Whenever they do a presentation, they start with a huge disclaimer. So I just take over this habit. And first of all, breaking into the US sounds a bit hostile. So we really came with peaceful intentions because we wanted to enter the market, serve our customers there. And we knew that this will be a long journey and not done by itself. The thing what we are doing is a bit complicated. Since like Chemline today in the morning, what they explained with Taiwan, we did also the same in Asia and of course in the US. We're doing consulting and automation software. So the things we are doing are very difficult. They are difficult to explain, and especially you can't touch it. It's expensive. It doesn't weigh anything. So if you export it, there's nothing in the box. And the last thing is I'm not a CEO of Systema, so there were some announcements. I'm the managing director for Systema Malaysia and Singapore. And last but not least, since we are not listed on the stock exchange, we don't need any disclaimer. So I'm happy to be with a German company. So what are we doing? In a nutshell, everything which is between your machines on the shop floor and the ERP on top. So we integrate everything which is there. Process equipment, measurement equipment, transport, storage equipment. We do automate processes there with software. We do optimize these processes, of course, doing all the visualization, optimization there. And the big part is also migration. And this is especially important for the US market because there was a lot of industry in the past, especially high-tech semiconductor, which then went away to Asia. And now it's coming back, and so there are still quite some customers around which having fairly old infrastructure in their fabs, and there's a lot of need for migration. And having said this, so we are lucky that we could collect experience really for the complete value chain. So starting with raw silicon, we have customers in the silicon wafer business or other materials wafer business. We have a lot front-end customers, back-end assembly and test. And we're doing this for more than 30 years now, and this is really the focus is on end-to-end business processes. So not only between the machines and the ERP, but also what is coming from, what is the kind of material coming into the shop floor and then also leaving the shop floor. And just these are a few things we are doing to give you a better idea. So everything which is needed if you want to ramp quality or quantity in your fabs. What's happening right now a lot is that the manufacturing is changing into a high mix, low volume manufacturing. So we have way more different products in there. You have a lot of old legacy software commodity, which we have to encapsulate and migrate, and then find solutions which are really closing the gaps and then bringing together the different pieces. And the end is really then hands-free manufacture or even the lights out fab. This is still a long way to go, but this is what most of our customers are striving for, and we are helping them with the software. And finally, so this is the end of the short commercial break. We are proud to be among the recognized providers of MES and MON implementations around the world by the latest Gartner report 2024. So if you're interested, there's a link down here. You can download the summary of this one from our website. It's a long way to get there, and this long way also led us to the US. So if you look at the list of our customers, and this is just there's not all of them, it's just a short summary. They are really distributed around the world. And of course, US is one, or is the biggest economy in the world. And by nature, there are a number of our customers there, and especially also the headquarter. And sooner or later, we had to make the step to the US. And of course, also to Asia later on. But US was first. And if you look at our history, so a company was incorporated in Regensburg, then moved to Dresden with the first big customer at this time, which was Siemens Microelectronic. And then we made the first successful step into the world in 2009 by incorporating our USA corporation. And then this was followed 2014 by the incorporation of Systema Malaysia, then 2019 India, in Bangalore, 2019 also in Singapore. And then 2020 in Brazil, and last year we just opened something in Indonesia. And the reason behind that is pretty simple. So we learned that it is just the best really to be where your customers are, and there is a demand from their side, and of course it's good for our business if we are all over the place and can support the customer on a global scale. Of course, we are ISO certified for what we are doing, and as already said, we are more than 30 years in the market now with the software, having something like 230 experts around the globe working in virtual teams. So what does it mean as a German at this time, really an SME, small and medium-sized companies? We've been less than 100 people at this time, to go to the US and start our own activities over there. So basically, there were both push and pull factors for these activities. The first one, which were coming more from internal drivers, were, of course, here in Europe, in the DACH region, there is just limited growth in terms of the potential customers, in terms of the market, and especially at this time, of course, a lot of things were going down in Europe, going to especially Asia. So finding new markets and growing there was the strategic goal. And also, to be clear, our target market are the multinational companies. So we are not working for small customers, but for the real multinational, international companies, and especially high-tech areas, semiconductor industry. So we have to be where the customers are. And there was really demand coming from the existing customers at this time. So we had already customers which had sites or sometimes even the headquarters in the US. And we won new customers in the US. So, and of course, they were asking for local support. So both at the same time. That means we have to find a way to be more present, and also, to be honest, there was a rare opportunity for recruiting, and this is something which is a bit special in the US. US companies sometimes are very much driven from the stock market, and they sometimes tend to fire good people on very short notice. Let's call it this way. And this was one of the opportunities we had from one high-tech company. There were some really, really good experienced people in the local market available in our industry. And of course, we knew them already. There was already trust, and this was a very strong driver for us to make the decision, and a bit also of a trigger to really make the step and get out into the cold water and start swimming. Of course, there are some major challenges. The first one is really you have to have a strategy. And I was really impressed by what Mark was saying before. Without a clear plan and also a clear focus, no way. It's impossible. So a strategy means also a long-term goal has to be there, and you have to be aware of the costs. So most probably of the beginning, the costs will be higher than what you earn there. This is just an investment you're doing, but since for us this was really a long-term activity with a strategic goal, we knew that it will take a while. And also, like Mark said, you have to adapt to the local networks and the market. And that's why we also decided to start in one region in the US, which was Oregon at the time, due to some customers which have been there and demanding support. And also, and was pretty impressive because these are not the hottest spots in the US like California or New York. So they're not completely crazy in terms of salary and other competitions. So the question was really also, what is the legal framework we're choosing for this? So easiest thing, have something like a representative office, or find a franchise way, or perhaps a joint venture, or some mergers and acquisitions, or just a subsidiary. So there were a lot of discussions going on. What is the best way? And, you know, we are a German software company. We love software, but we are not so enthusiastic about legal things. But it's a must. You have to take care for that. And there is really one thing you have to keep in mind, which is people. So whatever you do and have in mind here in Germany, is really the saying, also Peter Drucker said this, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. If you don't take care about the people, how do they behave over there, and also about your own people, your own team you established there, what are your customers doing? All the plans we have and the strategy and all these great things we have in mind are or might be useless. So you have to keep this in mind. And this was also a strong point today in the morning session about Asia. It's the same over there. It's a business between people, and you have to really take care for the people on both sides, yours and the customers. So what we did was we incorporated a Sistema USA corporation. So decision was not to go to a sales and support office, but from the beginning build an entity which can also operate independently of the mother company. So has some right to make decisions, have some right to execute projects, also to take over or maintain existing projects, but also really to be active in the market with the vision to acquire own local projects in the US market. And later on, so it was pretty nice to see, also support the activities we built up in Latin America from the US. So this was quite a good support that we started there already in the US before. So what we did was we started in Oregon due to the fact that customers and good people were available there. Like already said, of course, the local currency makes sometimes life easier for invoicing, also for tax questions. So we started really with a local company, which was controlled by the shares from the headquarters. Hello? All smooth? Okay, so I continue. So we're acting as a local company. And it's pretty important for some of our customer projects. We really need employees with a US passport, like also mentioned by Mark. So if you work into some critical high-tech semiconductor and also aerospace companies, or sometimes even medical, you have to have really employees on site which have a US passport. So this cannot be done from remote. And also, finally, one of the major topic was that we had trust in the local management we established, and it really paid off. So they are still with us, driving the activities in the US since 15 years now. So it was definitely the right decision to go with them. So market and politics, like Mark already mentioned, so the times they are changing in the US. It's really amazing to see after the industry, or let's say there was a kind of a downturn of the industry for a while because everything was going to Asia. But now with the, let's say, global politic changes and especially the US CHIPS Act, things are really changing in a very dramatic way. So there's lots of attention to manufacturing in the US again, and also a lot of funding coming into the industry, also and especially for the semiconductor industry. One of the things which is a bit painful is I would really call it the unavailability of production stuff. So since manufacturing was not so much in the scope for some years, there are not really a lot of people around who know what manufacturing means. And when the industry was incorporated in the US, the semiconductor industry, there were a lot of smart brains there. But these industry veterans, they are now retiring. Really, they are stepping out of the industry, and there's a gap in terms of the knowledge. And this is a problem all over the place, same here in Europe and in Asia, that manufacturing is not sexy for young talents. And don't get this wrong, but if you ask young people if they want to go to chip manufacturing or something like that, they will look with empty eyes at you and say, what's that? And there is really a huge demand for expertise, for experience. Because if you want to run high-tech and especially semiconductor manufacturing today, this cannot be done just by manually decisions and a lot of people. That's impossible. So you have to go for automation, and this is basically good for us because we're doing this for 30 years now. And for us, this is really it makes our life easier. It wasn't always that easy, so we've been pretty early in the US when there was not so much market around, but being there now is a great pleasure because there is quite some demand from the local market in the US and also from the headquarter of the multinational companies, which are often based in the US. So what are the experiences and learnings we made? And Mark already said that it sounds simple, but US is a really big country. So you really have to focus because otherwise you're spending half of your life in the airplane and in cars. It can be a really long journey. And so we focused really on the West Coast first to make it somehow handleable. So and not to spend too much efforts and costs on traveling. Good news is that Germany has quite a good reputation for engineering. So you can experience there a lot of enthusiasm for cars, for beer, for football, and of course for the German engineering. But this is also something you have to be aware of. There's also the thinking of over-engineering, so that Germans tend to over-engineer things, and you have to keep this in mind if you do projects with customers in the US. Things are different, and I will explain that a bit. The US market really has strong dynamics. So if you don't monitor carefully what's going on, also not only in terms of your customers, but also in terms of your competitors, you might have a hard time there because things change pretty quick. And we see that customers and competitors are merging, some are disappearing, changing their strategies. And also with the change we see right now that the market is just going upwards with a strong dynamics with all the companies coming back to the US, and even Asian companies start to build offices and factories over there. There is a strong movement in there. But like Mark already said, communication is different, competition is different over there, and also decision making is different. And this is something you have to learn and to accept. And of course, if you have local people on board in your local management, it helps a lot. That means you have some friction between the US team and the German team, but it's easier between you and the customer. And I will just explain a bit what I mean. So problem solving, if you look at this, you want to solve a problem coming from left to right. What Germans doing, they're thinking for a while, for a long time, making requirements, and they start, in most cases, they really find the right way and reach the goal. Might take longer, might be faster, might be more sustainable, but this is often we see in our projects with German customers. For instance, if I'm looking at my Asian customers and take the example of Malaysia, if they solve a problem, they listen and talk, or sometimes they pretend to listen for quite a while, and then they do something, they start, and then they make just a turnaround or a workaround and go a completely different way than anybody else. So they ignore all the as-is situation and just go around it and somehow find a solution. So they do their own way, and it works pretty well. Somehow it's crazy sometimes for German engineers, but you have to accept that. And the US is different. So they think, they start going, then it doesn't work, so they go back. Then they think again a bit, make a decision, and then they change the conditions and go really through the wall and make up a new way. It's absolutely impressive. This is something which seldom happens in Germany, but we see this in the US happening by customers. And all these ways are pretty valid. So you get to the point, you reach your goal, but you have to accept that the way how you get there is different. And this is again also something we have to coach our German engineers to be more patient with that, and also see this as a chance and not only as a risk. But this is really different in the culture between the different countries, regions of the world. Okay, finally, is it worth the effort, really? Glad to say, yep, otherwise I wouldn't give this presentation here. So we could really build sustainable business in the US. But I also have to confess the change in politics on a global scale now help a lot, because there's a lot of industry coming back to the US and a lot of demand for expertise. So that is pretty good for us, because the gap is really big in automation over there. That means a lot of work for us. But you have to keep in mind, you have to be patient. So from our experience, and especially as a very strong engineering-driven company, this is not a quick win. So it takes some time until you establish, until you get used to the processes there, until you accept the differences. And that also means you need trust from your headquarter management for the team over there in the US that it is really taking some time and it's worth. And luckily, the management of Systema had the trust, and it pays now finally really off being there. And we're having quite some successful international projects where the teams over the different countries are working together and supporting these multinational customers. And finally, so our findings is really the international opportunities. They are not for the big dogs only. So if you are brave, and know what you want, and that's really important. So you have to know your stuff, you have to have a strategy, and you have to do your homework. And I think the explanation Mark made was really good. So the approach to the market he presented was very, very reasonable and thoughtful. So without this homework, don't go there, because you will just burn your money. And then, of course, to be successful on the long run, you have to build sustainable teams where you really can trust the people. That's important, because I mean, like with every business, we also made experienced disappointments in some parts of the world. And having the right people at the right place you can trust is really mission critical for your work. And this can be also done by clusters, but you have to have people you can trust over there. And then, of course, don't forget, it's about people, it's about the communication you're doing, and you have to be stubborn, patient, and show some endurance to be finally successful. And this is the end of my presentation, so I hope you could get something out of it, and I'm also open to your questions and willing to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rico. I saw a question from Matthäus.
No, excuse me, Rico. It was just a missed point question. But thank you for the presentation. I enjoyed it a lot as well, Marco. Thank you.
No problem, Matthias. And thank you for your attention. Again, I have to confess, if I would have seen the presentation from Mark earlier, we would have become perhaps faster successful in the US, because a few things we really had to learn the hard way. To be honest, yeah, that's the truth. But I mean, we all become wiser and also accept the differences. And especially since this was the first real exercise for us, stepping out of our German comfort zone, it's always a bit painful, but we learned. And as you might have seen with the history of our company openings in other parts of the world, so we could really benefit from the experiences we made with the US start, and became more patient and also more focused on the important things, for sure. So again, Mark, thanks a lot.
Yeah, and Rico, I second the trust factor is huge. You really need someone in the country that you trust, that treats your company as if it's their own. And that's what I think has been successful. When I work with companies, I treat their company as if it's mine. So you watch your expenses on travel, you watch everything, because that builds that trust factor. So that's huge. And it's a small world, because I'm actually located in Bend, Oregon. So
it is a small world.
I'm where you've got some representation. So anyways, great.
Jens, so maybe I would have one question, if you still have some time, because as I noticed, your company, Rico, was quite big already while entering the US market, and I mean,
not that big, less than 100 people, to be honest. So that's not that big.
So if you can imagine, I'm having only three people owned company. So we are quite small, quite at the beginning, but already 13 years on the market, and since something like 3 years, we are in the electronics. So we are developing own systems, including hardware production, or first of all project, and then production of the hardware, and then assembly in ready-to-use machines. So this is something what we are making, and I was thinking about expanding outside of Poland, and the US market was looking quite interesting, as our supplier of touch screens is already there. So the question is, what do you think, gentlemen? Is it the right time to try to enter with the support of Mark?
I think Mark is the expert to answer this question, because we already had customers at this time. So it was a different starting point for us, and we were a bit bigger and already experienced in international projects.
Indeed.
But I like the approach Mark presented also. I mean, to segment the market and say, this is a go, this is a no-go area for that and that reason, and so on. I think he's the better person to answer this question.
Yeah, I think for what you described as the size of your company and where you are at your growth stage, I would look at the US market as far as who you could partner with in the market. See if there's a company that's established there that you would provide a unique added